controlling everything, which can be bad, you know, because, you know, you're on vacation for a week, or, you know, you haven't checked that email for a week, oh no, you know.
Right.
And so forth and so on. But now it's very good because immediately, 24 hours a day, there's dispatcher watching the stream of events. And when something happens that needs attention, they immediately can send somebody out.
Now, let me get this straight with MUFON. I'm not entirely familiar with the structure of it. Are there state directors for every state? I mean, do you have
That's right.
someone in Maryland, someone in Delaware?
That's right. And Ron Fink is here. He's the Maryland State Director.
Oh.
So you could talk to him.
Sure.
But we haven't, he's kind of new, but, you know, it looks like he's coming on strong. He's really organized there with his table. He's you know, he's only been there 6 or 8 months, but he seems like he's coming on strong. The only disadvantage he has, I'm not saying it's a terrible disadvantage, but he's out at Ocean City, right on the beach.
Yeah, right.
And it's not, you know, it's central in Maryland, you know, but, you know, he's trying to get around. He's trying to, I saw him at the MUFON Symposium, you know, over the summer, and I was gratified that he came out.
Where was that?
It was in Denver. I think next year it's going to be in California somewhere. But eventually we're going to get back on the East Coast.
Good.
But
I'd love to attend that. That'd be very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's good to see so many people because it is well attended. I mean, you get like about 500 people, and it's I ran the '99 conference, and I think there was like 600 people. But it really it's a lot. It's a lot to run one of those things. But today was hair raising in the morning. You know, we got a rocky start, but you know we're going forward. We're going forward. But the only reason I became state director is John Schuessler asked me to step up just because Rob was busy with the Fund for UFO research and other projects, and could, you know, he never was state director. You know, he's like, no, I'll just be assistant, or I don't want, you know, I don't want to wear that hat. So, you know, when they drafted me, I said, you know, I'll do it. In fact, for a couple of years, I held meetings and I said, I didn't ask for this job. Anybody else wants to do it? You know, but you know, it is an exciting time. I mean, I enjoy being state director. I do need to pick up the CMS, the case management system, a little bit more, but it's a big relief to know that, you know, Bigelow Aerospace. Bigelow's a guy that's spent money in the field before.
I was going to bring his name up.
Yeah,
sure.
And Rob knows the whole story of that. He stepped out for 14 years, and now he's back in the field.
Oh.
And he's putting where his mouth is. He made his original fortune with hotels in Vegas, but now he has Bigelow Aerospace.
Right.
And he's got Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Sciences or something like that, the BASS project, and that division is the one that is funding MUFON in regards to investigations.
I see.
When they reach a certain threshold of interest, then he wants, you know, he wants to deploy people in a timely way and have, you know, the hotels and the gas money and so forth paid for. I think you get $100 stipend per day.
Oh, right.
Which isn't bad, you know. I mean, it's been successful. Like Rob was saying in his talk earlier today, there's been 41 deployments so far since the project began.
How long has that been?
The project began. When did it begin? It's still pretty new. I mean, I think we just had like our 6-month report. But you get Rob on that with this specifics.
Sure.
But you know, because he's on the board, and we just got you know, a report about that. He just coordinated, you know, that he just pulled all that data together to give his talk today, and you know, that's where we're at right now with the 41 deployments. I mean, he had a chart up there anyway, but like the bar graph of potentially, you know, cases that could be looked at, it's like this big, but the ones that are actually deployed are this big, and you know, for every month. I mean, because they try to weave through, and they now Bigelow had said at MUFON, and I did get to talk to him a little bit.
Oh.
He's kind of circulated with people a little bit, and he doesn't normally.
That's a little unusual, yeah.
Very unusual for Bigelow, but he was, and he seemed to be in good spirits, and he basically wanted more deployments. He wanted to see more action, so he wanted to lower the bar on what triggers a deployment.
Right.
Because he said, let's just not be that choosy then. Let's go. And I think that was a good way to go, because I know myself, when you get involved in investigations, if somebody says they just saw a white light in the sky doing some nervous little movements that didn't seem like a plane, I don't know what it was, that's what they put in the system. But if you were to talk to them, it wouldn't be just a distant white light.
Right.
If you were to talk to them and bring them out, and he said, well, you know, then it kind of came to us and swooped down on us. But they don't really want to share that on the keyboard so much.
Right.
When you get the confidence going, and a whole other story comes out.
That seems like that's true all the way through this field too. I mean, if you pressed me, I could come up with a couple of stories that I'd really like to talk to you guys about off the record, because I'm not sure what to do with them. I've never been able to really make sense of them myself.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But they're
make
very
sense.
unnerving.
It really doesn't make sense.
Interesting stuff.
Yeah, there was a case, I believe it was in North Carolina, but an elderly couple were in an apartment, and they saw this blue light just hovering out on the road, and it kept going and persisting, and they called the police, and the police came by and, you know, came up to their apartment and maybe went in or whatever, and it just persisted. He goes, I guess we all know what we're looking at, and he just drove off. You know, and then later when the MUFON investigators tried to get involved, you know, they get the runaround. Like they said, I want to talk to, you know, Jeff or whatever, and they said, oh, he's on vacation for a week. And then you call half an hour later, oh yeah, he's right here. You know, this kind of thing.
Right,
or,
right.
And then he's like, I wasn't there. Then later he says, okay, I was there, but I wasn't dispatched. Well, if you weren't dispatched, how were you suddenly driving down the road and you saw this blue thing? I mean,
what do you know, I know
it's just kind of funny. You know, they just don't want to.
I know this is a very broad question, but what do you attribute that to? Why do you think people almost consistently are so hesitant to just engage it and do anything about it? I mean, you can come up with so many other circumstances about this or that. If this was affecting your life, if somebody had cancer, you'd do something about it. If, you know, your dog was lost, you'd go look for it. Why is it that this type of thing, people just...
They don't make the next... what would be a logical step is to investigate further or to call the officials.
Sure.
You know,
or even grab a camera and snap a few pictures.
Yeah.
You know.
In this case, I think they were scared. The man was in the wheelchair, and the woman, you know, they couldn't get outside. But I don't know if they had a camera. Or
right.
But, and then everybody, you know, the police and everybody was trying to say, oh, you know, there's just this lantern. There's this carriage, sort of a carriage sign, you know, with a carriage lantern on top. And it's actually, the innards of it were blank. It was just a metal frame that the sign was being worked on, or it wore out and they were going to replace it. But you just have this frame with this kind of carriage light on top. And they kept saying it was just that carriage light. Well, number one, they kept saying it was blue. It was hovering out in the road. And number two, it just turned out these people were virtually shut-ins. I mean, like I said, the man is in a wheelchair, the woman, I don't think gets around too much. The way that, and Rob was able to show that with the slides today, the way that just the building is built and the architecture, there's these things that kind of come out. It's just an architectural feature. Well, anyway, you can't see that sign from their apartment.
Right.
And he showed that with these contorted angles, you can't get to it.
Right.
So that's just why people have to make stuff up like that. Why? You know, I think it's very difficult for the police or any official or anybody to say, you know, we just don't know.
Right.
For some reason, that's just
that's also
anathema. You know, they can't
sure.
say those words. They'd rather pin it on, oh yeah, the carriage light, or, you know, with Colonel Halt, I don't know how late you can stay or whatever, but probably not until Colonel Halt speaks, but, you know, he was a lieutenant colonel at the time, since been promoted to full colonel, had a very high-ranking position with DOD inspections or something.
Right.
And he had that experience at Bentwaters RAF, and you know, every explanation in the world has come out. You know, like there were indentations on the ground. He saw this light, and he said, "No, I'm not mixed up by the lighthouse." You know, I mean, the lighthouse is like over here. You know, it wasn't a lighthouse. And then he recorded audio tape.
Sure, I've heard that on some of the specials.
Yeah, you can get a couple beats to agree with the lighthouse, but after that, it gets off.
Right.
You know, it's not in sync with the lighthouse being going around.
Right.
And
UFO hunters did an investigation that pretty clearly, I think, demonstrated that as well. Sort of the same kind of a theory.
Yeah, I saw that episode. And then he also has, like, it made indentations, like the landing pod. It was a fairly small vehicle, like 9 feet by 9 feet by 9 feet, and it made these indentations. And they poured, you know, plaster molds in there. You know, they did their work, and he brings those plaster molds in. So that will be shown later today if you're here. So that's like the real. You know, it's like the Downey Thomas sticking his hand in the wound, you know. I mean, you know, here's something physical from this event.
Right.
And I put on the little write-up on the web, you know, so many skeptics have tried to say it was a lighthouse and it was just rabbit holes.
Yeah, I saw the thing, the rabbit holes reference, yeah.
I said, let Colonel Hall tear holes in their theories, you know, as he explains the experience. And that's what I see a pattern over and over and over. Somebody has, you know, an experience that is not explainable. somebody tries to explain it with the most silly things. I saw that with Rob's parents, with my own eyes. I couldn't believe it. They were watching television, and every time they tell a story, it was a different show. But it was early evening, like 7:30 or 8, in the summer. So there was, and they were up in Pennsylvania, so it was still bright sun.
Okay.
In the middle of the summer. And they heard a sound that was like a rocket or an engine or something. And they were like, what in the world? And one of them turned the sound down on the TV, and they could hear it go by. And they have a big bay window with all the little panes. And the man was facing in towards the building, the room. But his mother, from the couch, she rotated and said, what is that? And she saw the whole view. And here comes this rocket-like thing. She just happens to see it, and he heard it too, that the rocket sound or some kind of engine. She thought someone was going to collapse on the house, or a plane was going to hit, and then she ran out, and she expected to see kids. She said it looked kind of serious for a toy. This gray thing with some kind of fins on it, just dull middle gray. And then the more you look at it, how weird that whole thing was, because they have this weeping willow tree, and it was in, between the pane of glass and the weeping willow tree. And there's so little clearance. I mean, the house kind of comes out in an L, and that thing would have had to be governed or directed. It would have grazed the house. It just makes no sense. And and she expected to see kids somewhere. There's nobody out in the street at all.
Right.
And you can see up and down quite far on their street, so it's kind of level straight for a while anyway. I mean, there was no kids launching anything. I mean, seemingly. I mean, this thing was going horizontal.
Right.
But meanwhile, I mean, she didn't know what to think, but she just describes it, and that's the end of it. But her husband was, which is Rob's father, was saying, oh, it was just a bunch of bees. We just heard bees. The bees sometimes swarm, and they take on a shape. And she's like, it wasn't bees. No, it was like an engine sound. But I've seen that explanation used in UFO reports.
Wow.
Oh, it was just buzzing bees swarming. How does that explain?
Right.
But it's I will say, a lot of people say, we just don't get those good cases anymore. I sort of disagree. What makes the 50s and 60s and early 70s so interesting is when you had a wave or a big sighting, people were worried about it. They were concerned about it.
Right.
They talked about it.
They
There
would
were a lot
sort of
of little
embrace
articles
it.
about
Exactly.
it. And it would be a big what's-its, but everybody would be talking about it. You see the headlines,
Right.
at least in a small paper or whatever. And the problem now is it's just not gotten the media attention
Right.
that it used to get. It's a sideline. Don't let George Norrie deal with that, or it's an X-File thing. It's not mainstream.
I hadn't planned to even mention this, but since you're saying something, last week everybody's been paying attention to the news. You've seen this whole balloon boy thing with this guy that launched. I thought what was very interesting to me was I had just gotten home from work, and I flipped on the news, and the story was happening in real time, and it was the balloon was still flying across wherever, caught in the wind, and everybody's chasing it. And it seemed to me, and I must have stuck with it for at least an hour, that the CNN anchors that were covering it absolutely refused to use the term flying saucer to indicate what they thought the balloon looked like.